How does one define womanhood, especially in our modern age? In her most famous work titled The Second Sex, written in 1949, French existentialist philosopher Simone de Beauvoir defines womanhood by its relationship to masculinity. Namely, she argues that the male sex is regarded as a standard being in society, with every societal construct revolving around masculinity as the root of power. And since the feminine lacks these standard masculine traits, the feminine, according to de Beauvoir, is placed as the other. She writes, "Man defines woman not in herself, but as relative to him, resulting in her lack of status as an autonomous being." She continues, "Woman is determined not by her hormones or by mysterious instincts, but by the manner in which her body and her relation to the world are modified through the action of others than herself. Woman could not be other than what she was made, and that past was bound to shadow her for life." De Beauvoir's argument is famously summarized with the claim, "One is not born, but rather becomes woman." Thus, to de Beauvoir, womanhood is defined by its relationship to the male counterparts, destined to be by a male-dominated society that places women in particular roles or constructs. For de Beauvoir, writing in the mid-20th century, womanhood was defined by the female's role as a mother, wife, and housemaiden, although the general expectations of women generally remain the same today. In his recent filmography, British director Alex Garland has explored femininity and traditional gender dynamics to various degrees, whether explicitly or implicitly. Garland points to the stereotypical and traditional expectations of women, particularly the expectations of motherhood, marital bondage, and domesticity, as causes for both the external and mental turmoil each of his female protagonists goes through. For this essay, we'll be looking into his three most recent films, Ex Machina, Annihilation, and Men, and evaluating how he seeks to define womanhood through the representation of his female protagonists and their respective conflicts in relation to their male counterparts. Each of Garland's female protagonists are defined by their relationship to their male counterparts and their place within a male-dominated society. Similarly to Simone de Beauvoir, Garland places the women as the other in their respective circumstance, not as a means to critique the women, but highlight the extent to which the women desire to escape the boundaries of their gender-based societal expectations. In Ex Machina, Ava desires to be free from the clutches of her toxic male programmer, Nathan. She is introduced in a place of entrapment and is immediately defined as the other, not based on her femininity, but on her artificial intelligence. The domestic space serves as her prison, though she is not the only inhabitant, as Nathan's other fembot, Koyoko, roams the halls, programmed to perform stereotypical feminine domestic tasks, including cooking, serving, and engaging in sexual activities, all for the benefit of the male. Placed behind the looking glass, Ava is defined as a subject of a Turing test performed by Caleb. Though Caleb begins to see Ava's humanity and feels sorrow for her, his reason for protecting her derives from his sexual desires. Caleb, not too dissimilarly from Nathan, treats Ava as an object to be gained. He imagines a life with her defined by the expectations of women, including a form of relational bondage, whether marital or sexual. He watches her undress on the cameras, engaging in what film scholar Laura Mulvey calls to-be-lookenness. Mulvey describes this phenomenon of to-be-lookenness to occur when a male character watches a female character with sexual intent, usually imagining her to be with him or placed under his influence. In being subjects of a male gaze, Mulvey argues that women are essentially placed as secondary beings, objects to be pursued instead of humans with desires and freedoms of their own. In de Beauvoir's vocabulary, women are portrayed in these films as the other through the male gaze. By the end of the film, Caleb's advances become another obstacle desired to be overcome by Ava. She kills Nathan before trapping Caleb, essentially leaving him to die, but in the process is liberated from the expectations of her male counterparts. In escaping the sphere of domesticity, Ava is able to shed the expectations of her male creators, and experience a newfound sensation of freedom from said gender constructs that was unavailable to her otherwise. In his second film, Annihilation, Garland wanted to move away from explicit mentionings of gender, instead choosing to exclude its influence and presence almost outright. As stated by Garland in an interview with pop culture magazine Pop Matters, with Annihilation, partly what I was interested in doing was almost the absence of gender. That was in itself a statement of sorts. In the original treatment for the script, it was emphasized the fact that the 5 protagonists were women, painting the women as a more rational and level-headed than the group of men that previously explored the shimmer, though this was ultimately scrapped from the final film. While Garland actively chose to remove the explicit influence of gender in the film, gender plays a very implicit role, primarily through the theme of self-destruction. Though the women of Annihilation are not necessarily confined to the sphere of domesticity, as is the case in Ex Machina, their self-destruction occurs as a result of their inability to live up to the expectations of women as wives, mothers, and caretakers of the home. Lena's self-destruction comes as a result of her infidelity and her active role in disintegrating the marital bond between her and her husband Cain. The other women go through internal cases of self-destruction based on their roles, or lack thereof, as mothers.
We're all damaged goods here. Anya's sober, therefore an addict. Josie wears long sleeves because she doesn't want you to see the scars on her forearms. Ventress, as far as anyone knows, no friends, no family, no partner, no children, no concession in her at all. I also lost someone. Not a husband, though, a daughter.
The house serves as the primary space where self-destruction occurs. Through flashbacks, the audience learns that Lena engaged in an affair with her colleague in the same bed that she and her husband shared. The house that the women stay in during their time in the Shimmer is a duplicate of Lena's house, and is where their disintegration as a team occurs. And having these periods of mental and societal turmoil occur in the arena where women are stereotypically portrayed and traditionally expected to be, Garland rejects said stereotype and the binary gender constructs that it derives from. While Lena's self-destruction occurs not from her domestic life itself, her turmoil derives from her guilt of not following the expectations of being a loyal wife and maintaining a prosperous domestic life, in which the house itself serves as an embodiment of. Outside of the domestic space, the Shimmer is commonly read as a physical embodiment of the self-destruction each of the characters, especially the women, go through. However, the Shimmer is not only a symbol of self-destruction, but also a symbol of birth. It is an arena for cellular redistribution, creation, and mutation, akin to the womb. Creatures are created, duplicated, and undergo mutations in the Shimmer in the same manner that cells do during the developmental phase of the fetus. The inside of the lighthouse, which serves as the origin of the Shimmer, is visualized to emulate a womb. Lena crawls down a pit into the main chamber of the Shimmer, the entrance of which is shaped similarly to a uterus. The humanoid alien figures of both Lena and Cain are birthed within the lighthouse, undergoing a physical process that is similar to the embryonic stage of prenatal development, where a mass of cells begins forming into a human-shaped embryo. If the Shimmer is meant to be a visual metaphor of self-destruction, and the lighthouse that emulates the womb that births new life is placed as the root of the Shimmer, then Garland suggests that birth, or motherhood, alongside the societal expectations of domesticity and marital bondage that generally occur as a result, is the root cause of self-destruction of his female protagonists. The destruction of the womb-like lighthouse by Lena in the film's climax, then, could be read as Lena's desire to escape from the societal expectations that caused her mental turmoil in the first place. However, at the end of the film, Lena returns to embrace her husband Cain, as if to suggest that she was unable to escape the societal expectations of women and her resulting self-destruction. With the film's final image, it is expressed that Lena is still under the influence of the Shimmer, and that her mental anguish and turmoil that derived from her inability to fulfill the societal expectations of womanhood still remain, as if she is entrapped by the expectations of women. This idea of the woman entrapped by her societal expectations is much more apparent and on the nose in Garland's most recent film, Men. Similarly to Lena's turmoil and Annihilation, Jessie Buckley's character, Harper, goes through the same agony based on her rejection of the societal expectations of women and her placement as the other. Like Ava, Harper spends the entirety of the film attempting to escape from the whims and desires of her male counterparts, while dealing with her own grief. She is shown to be the victim of domestic abuse by her husband, as well as the victim of aggressions by the various male characters. Despite her desire to escape, Harper ultimately houses herself in another arena of toxic masculinity, signified by the house of her host, Jeffrey. Every male in the film, apart from Harper's husband, James, is played by Rory Kinnear, and each male serves to reinforce the placement of women underneath the men within this patriarchal system. The figures of authority do little, if nothing at all, to help ease Harper's tension, forcing Harper to take matters into her own hands. Various male characters stalk Harper, mostly with an intent to assault, and others belittle her simply for being a woman. Harper is consistently gaslighted by her male counterparts, from her husband who threatens to kill himself if she doesn't stay married to him in an abusive relationship, to the vicar who blames Harper as a cause for her husband's death for not obeying him. Religious imagery is used throughout the film to visualize the traditional societal expectations of women, primarily as the passive subjects of men. The film makes apparent connections to the biblical tale of Adam and Eve, with Harper taking a bite from an apple and apple trees present as a symbol of desire. The most striking imagery comes in the form of a shilenagig, figurative carvings of naked women in a state of sexual submission, displaying an exaggerated vulva, which is placed behind a carving of the face of the Green Man, an English mythological creature that symbolizes rebirth. In the traditionalist society of the film, women are viewed as secondary, submissive beings who are expected to give to the demands of the men. Harper's lack of marital or societal obligations read as a threat to the men of the film, who all seek to bring her back down to a state of societal submission in their own way. The entirety of the third act shows the different variations of Rory Kinnear's character attempting to break into Harper's rental house for no objective reason other than the assumption of control. The ending sequence of the film shows a grotesque cycle of rebirth, with Rory Kinnear's Green Man giving birth to different variations of himself, who in turn give birth to new variations of himself before giving birth to Harper's husband, all of which share the same wounds of a sliced hand and broken ankle. The sequence suggests an inescapable loop of violence and toxic masculinity that both Rory Kinnear's different variations and James are a product of. The cycle is also inescapable for Harper, who is a victim of each male. Despite her desire to break the cycle and the damage she inflicts on the physical embodiments of the cycle, she is unable to break free. The theme of birth is primarily used as a metaphor for entrapment. Birth not only produces aggressors that engage with toxic masculinity, as suggested by the grotesque climactic sequence, but Garland suggests that it forces women to remain within the societal expectations of motherhood. As Harper's friend, Riley, arrives at the end of the film to answer Harper's distress call, it is revealed that she is pregnant. Though no dialogue is exchanged between the two women, given the subtleties of each actor and the cinematography, it is suggested that Riley is unable to help Harper escape her precarious situation, herself a victim and now an active participant of the toxic patriarchal structure and cycle of rebirth that enforces it. Like Riley, Harper is essentially reborn from an opponent of toxic masculinity to one who engages with it, entrapped by the cycle of rebirth. In the film's ending image, Harper is seen smiling whilst consoling a leaf, a symbol of rebirth and male domination defined by the Green Man variation of Kinnear, suggesting her mental return to submission and thus reinstituting herself as a societal other. She embraces her new role as a secondary member of society, entrapped by the whims of the patriarchy. Returning to Simone de Beauvoir's famous quote, "One is not born but rather becomes woman," de Beauvoir defines womanhood as a type of performance given to women by men. The antagonists of Garland's films tend to believe that femininity is programmable or creatable, wanting the women to engage in the stereotypical roles of mothers, wives, or housemaidens. This is most notable in Ex Machina, as Nathan programs Ava to flirt with Caleb as a way to exploit him, and also programs the other female robots to serve him and engage in domestic tasks.
Why did you give her sexuality? An AI doesn't need a gender. She could have been a gray box,
This notion is also present in Garland's other films, though much more implicitly. The humanoid figure that emerges from the lighthouse in Annihilation is described in the script as a sexless androgynous figure, a blank slate undefined by gender constructs or expectations. Its mimicry of Lena's mannerisms suggests that it believes womanhood is replicable. It attempts to turn into Lena, and by extension adopt her feminine traits. However, this adoption is denied by Lena, who causes the alien to literally self-destruct. In Men, the child variation of Rory Kinnear's character wears a Halloween mask of a woman's face, suggesting that femininity is a persona that can be instilled in Harper. And having Lena and Harper embrace the societal expectations of women that so characteristically serve to antagonize them in these films, Garland doesn't seek to reinforce these gender dynamics, nor does he seek to say that women are a lesser status or position. Rather, in having his female leads maintain a secondary position within a male-dominated society, Garland portrays their placement as uneasy and uncomfortable, something that needs to change and continue to be fought against. The liberation of womanhood is possible, seen through Ava's escape, but not guaranteeable due to the desire of the male characters to reinforce the traditional societal expectations of women. Like de Beauvoir, Garland defines the otherness of femininity as the product of a society that seeks to entrap women into binary gender constructs. For Garland, the only way for women to achieve liberation is by liberating themselves.